Hi, welcome to Go Rocky. This time around we're going to build a smaller computer, a small form factor computer for office tasks and minor video editing. Essentially, a small form factor PC will free up some space and give you more area to work with. Because it's still a general community quarantine here in Metro Manila, 96% of the build is contactless. Only one item was bought in-store, a walk-in store, which is the motherboard. I'll show you a step-by-step build for a mid to high-end PC. Some of the parts have run out of stock, so we've substituted two of the most important, which is the processor and the memory. We will be using a Ryzen 3 3300X instead of a Ryzen 5 5600X. And for the memory, instead of using a 3600 megahertz clock, we'll be using a 3200 megahertz. The first component that we're going to unbox is the motherboard. This is the backbone of your system. It provides the home for your processor, the memory, and other peripherals attached to it, such as the hard drive or the solid state drives. Budget builds usually contain one SATA SSD drive and one mechanical hard drive. But for this small form factor build, we'll be using M.2 NVMe drives instead. So this is the Gigabyte B550i Aorus Pro AX. AX meaning it has a Wi-Fi 6 compatible network Wi-Fi adapter. Usually you'll have just two major processors, which is Intel and AMD. We are building AMD once again. There, that's the motherboard. I guess we'll use this as a platform. I would say that this is at least one of the top-end motherboards. This is the heatsink for the M.2. We're going to be installing an M.2 NVMe 1 terabyte drive over here, and at the back we'll also install another 1 terabyte, since we're going with a full solid state build. As you'll see here, this is an AM4 socket. The difference from an Intel LGA and an AM4 socket is that the processor has the pins on the AMD and the Intel doesn't have the pins on the processor. The two main components that we're going to install on the motherboard is the memory, the two memory modules, and the processor. Let's see what else is inside the motherboard. I think this is the Wi-Fi antenna. We have the driver disc here. We have a case badge right there. These are the SATA cables, which we will not use because we don't have a SATA SSD. We have M.2 NVMe drives. This is the mounting screws for the M.2 drives. This is a fan header for the exhaust fans or intake fans. Most importantly, this is the manual. What I use the manual mainly for is to find out where the power and the power switch and LED power indicator is plugged into. This is what you'll usually look for, is where you put the reset switch, which we don't have in our case, the power switch, the power LED. Okay, so now we will install the memory modules. For the memory modules, I've chosen the Vengeance LPX 3200 megahertz. It's a 32 gigabyte capacity. Instead of choosing 16 gigabytes, I went with 32 gigabytes. Just for future proofing, I'm going to be using my Kickerland ceramic opener. Just remember, when you're installing memory, one notch here is shorter than the other side, and you simply have to match it with the shorter slot and the longer slot. Of course, what I'll do is take off the protector. 2 fingers. Hear that satisfying click. 2 fingers again. Make sure you support the motherboard. Make sure it's firmly in there. And there you go. Memory is installed. And the next one will be the processor. So we went with the Ryzen 3 because at the time of purchase there wasn't a Ryzen 5 5600X. It's important that you match your CPU cooler with the compatible processors that is suited for your cooler. We chose a Noctua cooler, and the best processors for the Noctua NH-L9A is actually this Ryzen 3 3300X and the Ryzen 5 5600X. Carefully extract processor. There's a sticker there. Remember to not touch the pins. Always touch it on the side, and don't touch this because there's a lot of pins that could get misaligned. The Ryzen 3 3300X actually includes a cooler by itself, but we are not going to be using this. Install the processor. Remember to hold it on the edges and don't hold it like this because we might bend the pins. What you're going to look for is when you flip it over, there's actually a gold triangle right there. So that's your indicator where you're going to align the processor. Usually you'll see it right here. There's a small arrow pointing there. So we're just going to align that triangle as such. But first, we're going to lift this lever up. This is a 0 insertion force socket. The processor should naturally drop in as such. You'll see that it's not shaking when you wiggle it. And all you have to do is just push the lever down and tuck it underneath the notch as such. Okay, what we're gonna do now is just peel off some plastics here because we might forget it. This is a nicely constructed motherboard with aluminum heat sinks. You'll see that the processor is no longer moving. When you even flip it like that, it doesn't come off. And now we're going to install the M.2 drive. There are only 2 screws here. Oh, there's a heat block. There's actually a heat block. And then another heatsink for, there's another heatsink for the actual M.2. Okay, we have two of these drives, which is the Gigabyte Aorus Gen 4 SSD, and we have the Western Digital 1 terabyte. This is a Gen 4 and this is a Gen 3. Since the motherboard has a Gen 4 on the front and at the back it has a Gen 3, we opted to get a Gen 4 so we can further utilize the speed of the Gen 4. Once again, it's better that you handle this on the sides. The sticker here usually is already a heatsink. For this one, it looks like it's a copper heatsink already. But the motherboard, usually when it's a gaming motherboard, will double up on that and install more heatsinks. When you're choosing an M.2, it has one notch right there. Don't make the mistake of choosing a SATA drive, which has 2 notches. Also, MacBooks would use 2 notches. You'll find 1 notch there to install the M.2 drive. Simply align it and push it in forward. It should hang just like this. And what you're gonna get now is this guy, the heatsink. Take off the heatsink sticker. Place it here. And then push it down. Just hand tight it till you know it stops just firmly, and you can let go. And then from there, you can install the secondary heatsink. Now we're going to go behind and install the second M.2 right here. We're going to install the heatsink that we bought for this. Now, installing this is actually not necessary. Usually I do this because the back part doesn't receive as much cooling as the front, so that it's at least cooled. Now, align the notch again. First, we're gonna take off we're gonna take off the screw. Oh, looks like it came with it. Notch, push in. And that should be in. Now we're going to remove these stock cooler clips. We're going to install the third-party cooler. Now we have the Noctua NHL9A for the AM4 socket AMD. It's in Chromax black. It's the only low-profile cooler that would fit the Metalfish S3 case. Always check that when you're building smaller. Always check the cooler, the CPU cooler is of the right size. Usually the manufacturer of the case will indicate whether a certain cooler height is applicable to their case. Chromax, very nice. Noctua always has the best packaging. It's signed by Roland Mossig, which is nice. They always have the best packaging. It exudes quality. Four screws, case badge, which is always nice. It's really nice, look at that. Has the Noctua thermal grease. We're not going to be using that. We're going to be using a Grizzly, thermal Grizzly Kryonaut. Whoops, we have the fan adapter for the motherboard header. 4 screws for the mounting bracket. Okay, it looks like, always check the heatsink. If it has a thin film here, that would lead to disaster if you forget to remove the thin film, because there would be no contact between the heatsink and the processor. I'll just put it aside for a moment. It comes with its own metal plate. We're going to be using that. This is for the fan, I guess. Noctua always has the best packaging. Of course, we're going to get rid of this guy. And replace it with this one. So what we're going to do now is install the thermal grease. We're going to use the thermal Grizzly Kryonaut again. We're going to apply it with an X pattern and then 4 dots on the corner. In my opinion, that's the best way to apply it, because it's going to evenly spread out. It's a hybrid of the X and the 4 dot, the P-size application. Oh wow, it's quite odd that this guy doesn't have the authentication, number. I hope this isn't a fake thermal Grizzly. We're gonna do an X here and 4 dots at the corner, 4 corners. So an X. And then another cross. And 4 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. And another one to make sure right at the middle. I guess that should be enough. Okay, so just gonna flip it on its right, flip this one on its right, and just look for the hole. we go. Make sure that it stays there. The plastic insulators should face the motherboard. And 4 screws. Always screw in diagonally. Just check here whether you'll see that if it's actually touching the processor. All we have to do now is screw everything in further until you feel a firm stop on the screw. Always screw in diagonally. There you'll see that all the threads are in. You'll feel that the torque is preventing you from twisting any further. Now there's no way for you to check the other side because it's actually covered. But let's go in for a final twist. Now we're just gonna install the fan header. I'm gonna use my automotive harness cloth tape to wrap this cable up. I'm not gonna use a zip tie because it's too bulky. Now we're going to bring out the case so we know what to do before we insert the motherboard. Now this is the Metalfish Swordfish S3. I think this came out stuff there. It's a really tiny case. That's my hand right there. And the case included a PCI Express 3 by 16 flex extension cable, which is really nicely constructed. The edges are properly copper tinned. The case includes 2 filters for the sides. Of course, you'll put this inside. 2 filters. Looks like this is the plate for the mechanical hard drive if you're going to install one and you're not going to install the GPU. Instead, you're going to use the graphics built into the processor. We have some SATA cables there. We're not going to use that. And we have the aluminum handle. It's going to go somewhere here, here. Just going to put that aside for the moment. Miscellaneous parts, slot covers, quality control card. I don't know what was in here. Looks like a bunch of screws. This is a cover for the cover. Right there. And we'll try using this. I've seen this screwdriver in some hardware stores. I think it's about 15 pesos. We're gonna open all the panels. It's a nice, maybe 2.5 millimeter thick panel. So this is where you place the motherboard. The standoffs have already been molded onto the frame. Now we'll take the other side panel out. This is where you place now the graphics card. And inspecting it, we only have one USB 3.0 for the front, one power button. There's a hard drive power. There's a hard drive power indicator. There's a hard drive activity indicator. There's a power LED indicator, and there's a power switch. Only 3. Power button feels tactile and sturdy. And there is at the top an exhaust fan. We're going to replace this with a noise blocker. First off, let's unscrew the fan. Looks like it has a washer. I like installing a third-party fan that I trust, so that we'll be sure the system will be cooled reliably. We're going to replace the top fan with the NB Black Silent Pro from Black Noise Technologies. You'll see the difference there from the Black Noise and the Metalfish. The way to know where the direction of the airflow is on a fan is that when you look at the spokes here, the spoke side, the hub, is always the output. The one without the spokes is the input. Output with the spokes, input without the spokes. It will usually indicate the rotation and the airflow on the sides here. The Black Noise fan actually has 2 cables. Has a bunch of rubber dampers and mounting screws. See what's going on there. Also has a rubber gasket, rubber damper. Let's go ahead and mount it in. We'll take care of the wires later. Make sure this is facing the motherboard. Make sure this is facing the motherboard side. Looks like the motherboard is over here, so it has to face this side. We won't be able to utilize these bolts and thumb locks and the rubber dampers because it's just going to stick out on the other end like that. Okay, so we're done installing the top fan from Noise Blocker. Unfortunately, we were only able to install just one because the other fan was getting in the way of of the USB front panel and the power button. We will install the power supply before we install the motherboard. We have the FSP Flex Guru. It's a Flex ATX power supply unit. It's a 500 watt power supply. It's enough to power everything inside the tower. I'll be posting a power supply calculator link for your reference so that your system won't be underpowered. I've never used a Flex ATX power supply before. Looks like this one is an adapter. I'm not sure if we would still have to use this, but we'll find out later. Once again, when you're going small, when you're going very small, you're gonna have to go with a Flex power supply unit. Of course, we got the power supply cord. It's a pretty hefty power supply, and a lot of stuff is really packed in there. I think we'll have to reduce the cables at some point. I'll figure out how to do that. Probably cut some off. Always try to do a dry fitting in your case before you tighten things up. I'm just going to try and slide it in. Looks like it's going to sit flush there. And yeah, we can now screw this in. There we go. That's tight. Just taking a look at the, looks like it's just floating there, but that's okay. Hopefully it doesn't cause any vibrations or anything. So now we're gonna slide the motherboard in. Here it is. And just slowly, wouldn't hurt to hold on to the fan here. Okay, there are a bunch of screws here that come with your case. These bigger hexagonal screws are for the power supply and hard drive. I think these are for the side panels. You'll know that it's for the motherboard mounting when it looks like a hat right there. There's a little roof and then a top hat. If you may allow me to call it that. There's only 4 standard mounting holes on an ITX motherboard. Hand tight. Looks like we're gonna have to loosen it up a bit, just so we can accommodate the other 2 screws. Oh, you know what? I may have made a boo-boo. It looks like we need to install the PCI Express extension first before the power supply comes in. So I'm just gonna take this out first. I had to remove the power supply so I can pass through the PCI Express extension for the graphics processor. And we're gonna do that now. There's a notch there, notch there. Make sure this is released. I'm simply gonna slot it in. There you go. You should hear that snap. And you know, when it snaps like that, it's in. And now to deal with the other side. See, the graphics card will mount in this manner. We'll put in the power supply back in later. When you're building a computer, it's okay to make mistakes, but not the kind of mistakes that you, for example, poke into the PCB and scratch onto the copper traces. But mistakes like these, when you have to take out part to fit in another, it's nice to have those mistakes, because of course you learn along the way. And we're gonna open the MSI Aero ITX. This is a 1660 Super. I was gonna get a 2060, but the end user won't be utilizing that much power. Always remember to account for the size of your case, because this is the only one that fit into the S3. Cards like these fit into the S3. Let's take out the terminal protector. There you go. PCI Express right there. It should go in. This should mount like that, and then it should plug in like that. We need to screw this in. I think we're gonna have to use one of the motherboard screws. You know, the one that looks like a hat. One that looks like a little safari hat. Okay, remember, I'm not gonna tighten it yet because we don't know if we're gonna use this slot here or this one. We're just gonna do some dry fitting first. It's all it is, dry fitting and then installation with the PCB on the card. So this card is actually moving, and wow, it's not going flush. Pretty ingenious for a case manufacturer to reuse hardware for furniture. Guess we need to remove the memory for that. Okay, so everything's in there. I've already put the power supply back in, and the card is in. It's already a little flush in there. The issue was the PCI Express extension cable was too bulky, so I had to crimp the corners. And every time I would do that, it comes off on the other end. The whole CPU tower is becoming dense, more dense now. It's about maybe 2.5 to 3 kilograms in weight. It's pretty heavy. I'm gonna have to reduce the cables here, and also if you can see right there from the top that the GPU is kind of sticking out, and that's gonna be a problem for the panel. I guess that's the issue with a lot of the S3 builds that I've been seeing. They're putting foam pads here so that the side panel won't hit the edge of the blades. Let's go ahead and release all the cables and see what we actually need. The cables that we need are the 24 pin, the 8 pin for the GPU. I don't think we need the other one. 8 pin for the GPU, and the other one for the CPU power. We've routed some cables, the 24 pin and the ATX 12 volt. We've plugged it in, I removed the cloth harness tape and routed the CPU fan cable over to a much better place where the fins aren't blocked. Routed it over here, tucked it in here. Later, we'll be arranging all the cables, plugging in the USB front panel headers, the power switch, and the LED power lights. We'll be cutting some of the unneeded cables here. I think I'm going to retain one cable in case I need one for a SATA SSD drive in the future. I've plugged in the power for the GPU. I'm going to tie down the GPU shroud with some zip ties so I can tuck it in so that it won't touch the side panel cover. And so the fan would rotate properly. As you can see here, the terminals are actually exposed. I don't want that. I'm going to cover it with some cloth tape. These are live terminals, so I don't want them exposed. I'm going to cover it with cloth tape. I'm going to cut off some cables here that I don't need. Molex. There's only so much peripherals that you can fit in here that you don't really need all these cables. I'm going to cut some of them, or most of these cables I'm going to cut, and I'm going to shrink wrap them. I'm going to heat shrink it with this, I think this is I got some shrink wrap shrouds from a hobby store, Turnigy brand, from Hobby King. This is from my RC builds. First off, we're gonna make sure before we cut anything here, and so that we can return the power supply just in case it doesn't work. We're not gonna cut it yet. We're just gonna make sure whether it turns on, and we're gonna open up the monitor and plug it in. If it turns on and reaches post, we're gonna cut this off so that we have better airflow. I don't want to tuck it. I don't want to tuck these extra wires in here because it's just gonna it's going to interfere with the airflow. Yeah, it's pretty heavy now, very dense inside. But the actual goal is to leave some voids here for the air to flow. Since I plugged the power for the motherboard and the ATX 12 volt, we're going to plug in the power switch and the power LED in, not the hard drive LED, not the hard drive activity LED yet. For testing purposes, so that we can see whether the computer posts. Pretty big box. This is the Lenovo, I think, yeah, it's the Lenovo Q27Q-10. 2560 by 1440. It's a 2K monitor. It's 75 Hertz. When I buy monitors, I would usually have the salesperson turn it on for any dead pixels. But unfortunately, this one was bought online. There we go. It actually has a display port. So we're just going to install the power and the power LED. So there, we're just going to take a look at where this is where it says the power switch and power LED are located. We're just gonna install the power switch. And we're we're gonna get the monitor. Let's see if it posts. Plug in the HDMI. We're just doing this before we cut off some cables and tuck everything in. Do some wire management later. Plug in the monitor. Turn everything on. See if it posts. There you go, and it actually boots up. But of course, there's no Windows 10 yet, so. Okay, it looks like all the wires are okay. It's doing post. Of course, there's no Windows 10 yet, so it's not booting. So we're gonna turn it back off. Turning it back off and turn everything off. Unplug everything. Just put the monitor aside. Check if there are any more, if there's any, we're gonna check if there's any power left by pressing the power button. And looks like it's completely drained of the power. So now that we know that the system posts, we're gonna tidy up the wires now. We're gonna retain one of the SATA power cables, which is this one. And I believe I'm gonna cut it off right here and put some heat shrink wrap cable. Heat shrinks don't actually need these guys, so we're just gonna cut it off. Liberally, I'm gonna tie it up over here so that I know that this is the one that we cut off. And what I'm going to do is cut it in increasing lengths so that just in case I need to reconnect it, I know which wire goes to what wire. Okay, so we just line it up like that. And I'm just going to use my electrician's scissors and cut it diagonally. There we go. We'll just keep this as a spare. We know which wires we need to reconnect just in case, but I doubt that we will need those wires anyway. So I'm just gonna cut some heat shrink. Like I said, we don't want any exposed live wires here, so we're gonna wrap it. There we go. So this one, we don't really need this. We just need one SATA power connector. We're not really gonna be using another SATA drive, so I'll just cut that. Now we're gonna put in some more FU. Okay, that's covered. The rest of these guys are covered. Now we have less cables to worry about. There we go. Safety first. These are one of the best zip ties, by the way, KSS. We're going to put another zip tie here. Now we're going to try and tie down the GPU shroud. And we're going to test it again. Hopefully the fan doesn't hit the side panel. Still does. Wow. Okay. I got some sponge window seal. This is actually just lying around the house, so we're gonna use it anyway. I guess this is where we need it, right here. Yeah, it seems to have fixed it, but yeah, we still have to clear some areas here. Just gonna arrange the wires here. And finally, we're gonna install the hard drive LED. I guess this'll do. I mean, it's not hitting anything, so we'll just leave it at that. And there you have it. Looks like it's pretty clean. As you can see, when we cut all the unnecessary wires, there's a void here for the fan to suck air in from the bottom. If we had left the other cables there, then that's a potential source of heat. And another zip tie. There you have it. Pretty clean. It's kind of heavier now. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll put the screen on. What I did was I put my palm right there and I screwed them one by one. But I'm going to do it again so I can adjust it. There we go. At least it's a little flush now from side to side. Right here, this is the Xiaomi keyboard. It's a Xiaomi mechanical keyboard 600K. I don't know what this is, Miu 600K keyboard. Fairly nice keyboard. I was supposed to get the Logitech's, but this is a really nicely constructed keyboard. This is it's shrouded with some weaving here, a sleeved cable. It's a little silent. It's a red key switch. See here? Not sure if it's a Cherry, but it says it's a weird brand. It says Kali, but it's good enough. Nice and simple. Aluminum keyboard. This whole thing lights up, by the way. It also has some lighting patterns. I didn't choose a wireless keyboard because I didn't want the user to keep changing or charging the batteries. And we're gonna get the mouse. This is a Logitech G102. It's a gaming mouse. But yeah, I didn't get any ordinary 300 peso mouse. And since gaming mice have durable switches, I would assume they would last longer than a regular mouse. Also corded, by the way, so the end user won't have to worry about batteries or charging it. There you go. Just gonna get the monitor and I'll be back. Now I've hooked up the Wi-Fi antenna and plugged in the monitor power. I've downloaded a Windows 10 installation into this USB drive. Just use Google and look for the Windows installation for via USB. I'll post a link on the description so that you can readily find that. I'm going to press the power button now. Hit delete, F1 and F2. There we go. Looks like it's windowed. System fan is running. CPU fan is running. System Fan 2, we don't have a System Fan 2. UEFI SanDisk Partition 1, we're going to boot to that since that's where we downloaded the Windows 10. The Aorus 1 terabyte NVMe, and then there's the Western Digital Blue 1 terabyte. 16 gigabyte at 2133 megahertz. But we're going to enable the XMP. CPU temperature is about 39, which is okay. 32 gigabytes of RAM, 3300X 4-core processor. Today is February 2, 4:36 a.m., which is the right time. We're going to go to advanced mode now and go to the XMP and do profile 1. Simply choose profile 1, hit enter. Leave everything in auto and we'll exit, save and exit setup. Yes. We're just waiting for the Windows 10 installation to come up. Oh, okay, let's hit install now. Setup is starting. Activate Windows if this is the first time you're installing. I don't have a product key. Then we're going to choose Windows 10 Pro since that's the most complete installation. Accept. Next. Upgrade, install. No, we're going to do a custom. We're going to do a custom install Windows only. Of course, we placed the first drive, the Aorus 1 terabyte drive, at the front of the motherboard. We're going to use drive 0 because this is the Gen 4 NVMe M.2 drive, and click next. Remember that the first SSD that you place on drive 0, which your manual will also say, indicate that it's drive 0. That's always the default Gen 4 for a B550 motherboard. Region is Philippines. US layout. Next, skip. I don't have internet for the moment. There's more to discover when you connect to the internet. Continue with limited setup. There, I just skipped the password so that it won't keep me asking for anything, so that we can get to the desktop as quick as possible. Online speech recognition, it's okay. Put yes in everything here. Accept. Now it's saying hi. We're getting everything ready for you. And now we have the desktop. So we're going to connect to the internet. There's, because our motherboard is an AX model, it's just saying that we are connected to a Wi-Fi 6. I'm using an Asus Wi-Fi 6 router, by the way, so Windows will let you know about that. We're setting up your G102 light sync. Okay, let's let Windows do that. From here, we can now download the BIOS for the motherboard so we can have that updated. Gigabyte.com to download our motherboard BIOS. Let's see here. Motherboard Aorus Gaming, AMD chipset, B550. There we go, B550i Aorus Pro AX. Click that, go to the support, go to the BIOS. Make sure it's not a beta release. So the latest BIOS is always, I'm not sure what A means. Maybe it's an alpha release. It might be the next stage after beta before its final version. Okay, we'll just download the F13A. So we are in the BIOS once again by entering F2 or delete or F1. We're gonna go to System Info and Q Flash. We're gonna update the BIOS. You can see the BIOS or update the BIOS. The current BIOS version is F2 last year. So we're gonna update it for this January. Update the BIOS, enter. I've inserted the USB already. I've downloaded the latest BIOS from the manufacturer, the F13A. This is the alpha release. It's not. I think it's not the actual final release, but since there was a minor addition, I think this would be okay. Click that. Next. Are you sure you want to update? Yes. See, it's the current flash is the F2 version. Update BIOS is F13 version. So we're going to go ahead and click here to start. It's going to take a while because it looks like it's a big update from July 7, 2020 to January 27, 2021. Okay, it's going to reboot. We're going to go to NVIDIA and download our graphics driver. These are the most basic things that you need to download. Graphics drivers, BIOS, chipset drivers from AMD. We'll choose United States instead. Go to drivers, GeForce drivers, GeForce GTX, no, GTX 16 series. Oops, oh there you go. Looks like Windows updated the driver already, but well, we are going to still download the one from NVIDIA. Not so big, 121 megabytes. Yes. It's a pretty bright monitor, by the way. This is the webcam that we're going to use. It's a Logitech C925. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's a C925. We're going to use this as our webcam, the Logitech C925E. And we're going to open it up while we install the video drivers. This webcam actually has a privacy screen that you can flip. It's really nice. See, has that privacy screen. Logitech always makes the best cameras, but this one doesn't have the Windows Hello function. It doesn't have the face recognition. I think only the Brio has that feature, and the other upper models. What is it doing? We don't need to log in. We just need the drivers to be installed. We'll go back to the Aorus and download we're going to download some utilities. Yeah, we'll get the chipset. APU driver. We'll get the chipset driver. RGB Fusion. Sure, we'll get the RGB Fusion. Easy Tune. Sure, okay. System Information Viewer. Sure. On-off charge. Okay. Smart Backup, Game Boost. No, we're not going to download Game Boost. No. Motherboard utility. Yeah, let's install the motherboard utility first. How about the fast boot? Let's install the fast boot. Let's restart it later. On-off charge. I guess this is the USB utility for phones and such. I can see that the Gen 4 NVMe M.2 drive is working flawlessly. I don't know what that sieve is, but we'll install it anyway. Later. Easy Tune. RGB Fusion. Yeah, we need this to control the light on the motherboard. The motherboard drivers are taking a while. By the way, remember to restart for each and every software that you install, especially for motherboard drivers, chipsets, graphics drivers. Don't do what I just did. I'm just doing this because I'm kind of sleepy. Oh, it restarted by itself. And hey, while it's restarting, I'm gonna install the camcorder. I mean the webcam. Did I just say camcorder? Oh, look at that. It's actually hitting the... Look at that. It hits the bezel. The Logitech hits the bezel. I guess we're gonna put some spacer there later on. Okay, I just plugged in the Logitech. Okay, what we're gonna do now is we are going to enable the Western Digital, the second storage drive. We don't see it now, except for the local disk C, which is the Aorus NVMe drive. We'll just go to search, type disk, go to create and format hard disk partitions. You must initialize the disk. Okay. Make sure it's GPT, not MBR, because if you put it to MBR, that's going to be the boot disk. It says here unallocated. That's the Western Digital. This is the disk 0, the Aorus. This is your Windows drive. New simple volume. Next. Leave it to the default. Next. Of course, assign a drive letter, D. Next. Format the volume label. We'll just name it storage drive. And then hit next, finish. And there you go. Now we can X out of this window and you'll see the storage drive right there. It's now enabled. Maybe I'll just rename it local disk. There you go. And that's it. Just download the rest of your software. Don't forget to download an antivirus. We're gonna do a B-roll of the finished tower, if you can still call it a tower. This is the APC battery backup. It says here 1100 VA, volt ampere, or 550 watts. Always look at the wattage, don't look at the 1100 VA, because this is the no load value. This is the load value, 550 watts. My PSU is actually 500 watts, so there's a 50 watt buffer, maybe for the monitor and speakers. Let's open it up. I think this is still the one that they make here in the Philippines. Yeah, you'll know that it's made in the Philippines because it has that QC tag. All right, what you need to do initially when you get a UPS is charge it for about 24 hours. Usually an APC UPS would require you to plug this jumper in. There you go. Now it's functional. There's a circuit breaker on this one. All right, there you go. Just connect the power cord and charge it. Hard to do it with one hand. There we go. Just to test it if it's turning on. Okay. Looks like it's going through a self-test. There you go. It's actually coming on. Now we're gonna turn it back off. Okay, I'm gonna charge that for 24 hours. The exhaust fan is kind of noisy. This is a pretty nice Lenovo. Look at that, that's metal. It's a nice Lenovo monitor, very slim. Look at that. There's the C925 with the privacy shutter. There you have it. Okay, the ambient room temperature right now is 27, and I'm getting about 48 C on my CPU, and the system is in idle. We're gonna do some CPU-Z stress test. See what happens. Bench, stress the CPU. Let's see what happens here. Look at that. Just climbed to 77 on a stress test. So weird. I've already removed the filters on the side panels because I think it was contributing to the heat. So it's still up to 77. Oh, look at that, 78. Okay, I'm gonna try and disable the profile 1 and just put it to the normal. Okay, I'm also gonna open this edifier. It's an edifier M2280BT. It's Bluetooth. It's a Bluetooth stereo desktop speaker system. It's Bluetooth 4.1, and let's check it out. Looks good. It's an edifier right there. All right, so which of the three should I install on the case? Is it the Noctua, the Ryzen 3, or the Aorus? What is the simplest one? I think I'm going to choose the Noctua. I don't want to install all three of them because it's going to be it's going to be messy. I mean, I can put this here, but the ORS already comes up on the screen, so that not so much for this. Don't really need to brag about the Ryzen 3. This one looks really simple. I'm gonna put it right in the middle, right there. Gamit tayo ng skwala to put it right smack in the middle. And there you go. I think it looks better with just the Noctua badge. See, right smack in the middle. Okay, so this is just a comparison between the TU-150 Lee & Lee in the middle, the Metalfish S3, and I forgot the name of this. It's also a Lee & Lee, but it's pretty old school. It's my Core i7. It's not a mid-tower. I guess it's a full tower silent case. Here's my hand for comparison. It's about 6 inches. I'll just show you the table. They delivered it in 3 hours. This table is from Ergo Home, the Primo table and the Spectrum chair. We're gonna set it up and see how everything looks, including the pad, the mouse pad, and the keyboard pad. Just gonna open it up. There you have it, the complete setup. Haven't slept overnight. There's the Cappuccino Primo table from Ergo Home and the Spectrum chair from Ergo Home as well. There's a UPS. There's our tiny case, perfect for the small home office. There's the Logitech C925E. Hey, if you have a build in mind, you can go ahead and send me a private message. I'll help you build your computer if you agree to be on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.